on the other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
The hell you're doing?
Trying to scale back the collection. Some of these guys I just don't appreciate, so I'm trying to get rid of them.
Oh yeah, I get that, but why Star Saber?
I just don't get anything from him. He's one of the few masterpiece figures I barely mess with.
You know once it's sold off, there's no chance of reviewing him, right?
Yep.
So are you gonna review him first?
Hey, hang on.
What's wrong?
You actually had a good idea for once.
Yeah, I surprisingly have those quite often, you know.
In late... wait, hang on a minute, something's wrong. Sorry, just give me a minute. That's better. Anyway, in 2018, Siege released to the world, and right off the bat, people could tell that there was something wonderfully different about this line. We weren't dealing with Prime Wars level of quality anymore. Oh no, we were playing with the big boys now. Then 2019 rolls around, and a brand new size class is announced, the Commander class. I've already gone over how this went down with the Skylinks review, however, there's one thing I didn't touch on, and one thing that many people forget. The possibility that this new development presents. The new Commander class is ripe with possibility for a plethora of characters across multiple continuities, and one character has received more requests than any other, Star Saber from the Victory series. Initiated by Wesley Dixon, the We Need Star Saber hashtag took off on Facebook and Twitter, and although it wasn't the majority of the fandom that was requesting such, it was a very powerful movement. Now, being real here, I'm aware the fandom tends to get a bit annoyed by such hijinks, but truth be told, that is the best method to get Hasbro to listen. That's how they determine which figures to do next, aside from previous figure sales. That being said, Star Saber isn't exactly starved of figures. Granted, he has still been pretty famished, but there have been a few releases over the years, and some throwbacks in the Unicron trilogy, and most importantly, a Masterpiece figure. So, if the Masterpiece figure already exists, why do people still clamour for a more modern update? Aren't other characters more deserving of such? Well, this is where things get a little more complicated. Yes, the figure does exist, but is it truly worthy of the fandom's praise? Well, to find out, greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to Masterpiece MP-24 Star Saber. Now, to understand the weirdness of this release, we have to take a look at the progression of the Masterpiece line itself. Many people will divide the progress of the line in different ways, but I like to split it into 4 different main categories. The Baby Steps, the Golden Age, the Sunbow Shift, and... Of course, my way of splitting things keeps the Beasts in a separate category, because they have remained mostly consistent in both design and quality since Primal was first released, but everything else, well, that's another story. Keep this list in mind, though, because it's going to be very important later on. But for now, Star Saber's core jet mode is actually pretty f***ing sweet. Honestly, this whole set is off to a really good start. Right off the bat, this fits right into the second group of Masterpiece aesthetics, leaning hard into the animation stylings, but providing a healthy dose of detail. Sure, you're not going to get any of the toy deco elements, but the overall shape is positively lovely. The multi-layered nose cone does a fantastic job of accenting the swishness of the design, and I love the painted detail near the cockpit. Well, the yellow is plastic, but the back is certainly painted. It doesn't seem like it at first glance, though. It's really well done in that regard. The wings continue the swishness, even if the arms do get in the way a little bit. I love how they handled the missiles that were initially used to disguise the hinges on the original. Instead of finding a way to smooth them out, they exaggerated them. Their position works really well, allowing them to draw attention away from the aforementioned arms. No idea why the wings are painted on both sides, though. The only time you'll ever see them is when they're sitting on the back. Actually, after recording that part, I realized they're seen on the front of the combined jet. Yes, I'm an idiot. Carry on. Anyway, back on topic. The cockpit is amazingly luscious. This blue is premium as f***, and the red paint separating the sections is done practically perfectly. Massive kudos, considering red is one of the hardest colors to get right. And damn, even the cockpit is painted well. They didn't need to go this hard in this area, but goddammit, they were committed in this aspect. Of course, the existence of a cockpit implies a pilot, and of course they've decided to include one. It would be stupid not to. One kind of stupid thing, though, is the sheer amount of paint on this damn thing. Like, sweet Jesus, the thing is painted to absolute hell and back. Honestly, there was no reason to go this crazy, especially on something this ruddy small, but hey, they did it. I guess the paint at least makes it easier for him to be seen in the cockpit. Personally, I don't see much point in terms of going to such lengths, but they chose to, and it really paid off in this mode. The only real section I can complain about is the back section. Honestly, it's a little underdone when compared to the front 2/3, but I totally do understand. It has to form the chest, so I get it. Would I have liked some larger wings on the back? Sure, but I'm sure there's some accuracy reason for them to be this small, and these have to shove themselves into 2 different modes, so I can easily forgive them. Beyond that, I've actually seen some people complain about the chest on the bottom, but surprise, that's actually accurate to the original animation model, so get Besides, every jet is under kibble. It's perfectly fine. This one handles it pretty damn well anyway. Like in the last review, I mentioned that Studio Series Blitzwings was pretty good, but this is a Masterpiece figure, so obviously it blows it out of the water. Overall, this is a fantastic mode, and it's sized well to boot. If you're a massive fan of core robot Star Saber, then you're probably going to be pretty damn satisfied with your purchase. However, we all know that's not the main vehicle mode. Getting it plugged in is a little difficult, but eventually it locks in rock solid. And... Okay, where the did the charm go? Look, I don't think this looks bad in the end, but never in my life have I seen a Transformer go from amazing to unsalted soggy chips in such a short time. With a simple act of plugging this thing in, they've gone from, yeah mate, this is alright, ain't it? To... If we're talking about things that are quote-unquote wrong, or I guess more accurately quote-unquote bad, I can't think of anything specific. But this figure really doesn't meet the expectation of what a masterpiece figure is supposed to be. The front section remains as awesome as it did initially, but as you start to move back, things get woefully lackluster. The shape's all there, lining up with the screen model pretty closely, but in terms of everything else, it's almost as if the designers fell asleep, much like I did 2 seconds ago. The middle section does have a lot of detail, but it seems a little more amateurish than the core jet, and also far less crisp. It's not quite Siege Optimus levels of soft and fuzzy, but after you notice it, the section really stands out from the rest. There's also a general lack of fluidity back here. Bits kind of just start and stop with no clear idea of what's meant to be happening. I get that this is the main focus of Star Saber's jet mode, these are, but it doesn't feel like they put in enough effort. Then you get to the back, and my word, they just did not give a shit, did they? Sure, it's nice that they incorporated the thrusters, but oh boy, they didn't even bother to cover up any of this. And sure, I've given a lot more leeway to other figures around the same size when it comes to the handling of kibble. Here's the thing though, we're not dealing with a chug figure here. This is a masterpiece release. We're dealing with the big boys now. A certain level of quality is expected here, and this mold just doesn't meet it. That same discrepancy between expectation and reality applies to the head module. It looks incredibly out of place. Now, I'm aware that this is a core part of Star Saber's character, but you know what isn't? Lack of locking tabs to keep the damn thing in place. Seriously, you couldn't think of anything, and sure, masterpiece figures aren't meant to be played with on the same level as chug ones, but even just gently picking up the damn thing to move it to a different shelf causes it to come undone. Also, was there no way to make the head fit in a little better? Was there no room for them to engineer a cavity for it to sit lower on the top? Again, yes, this is toy accurate, but this toy takes a lot of liberties this time to give it a more animation accurate appearance, and the animation model has the thing blend in a lot more. And this brings us to the other main issue with this mold, aside from not being up to what was then considered to be the masterpiece standard: confusion with the design philosophy. So remember those categories I split G1 Masterpiece into? Well, logically Star Saber should fit into the Golden Age, right? What does the Golden Age entail then? Well, the way I see it, classy engineering, phenomenal realistic mechanical detail, slight toon stylings, but not too much so it doesn't get boring, and an emphasis on solidity. And with the core jet mode, you can definitely see that, but then you get to the combined jet mode, and hang on, this seems more akin to the Sunbow era. For whatever reason, the Takara design team decided to lean much harder into the cartoon design than they had before, and oh boy, you can really tell this was a first attempt. The sides of the jet are ridiculously bland when it comes to detail, but it's a little difficult to realize why it ends up like that. The way I see it, it's all about the lack of understanding of what was required, given this is the first kick up the arse right into the Hypertoon era, or I suppose prior to such. I don't pretend to like the new aesthetic that several modern masterpiece figures go for, but at least I acknowledge that the designers are understanding what Sunbow designs are and what makes them tick. Flat surfaces, rounded edges, and bright, vivid colors. This requires a shit ton of paint to make it work, as flat, boring plastic would end up looking cheap, especially on triple-digit figures. Now, the Victory character designs aren't exactly the same, with sharper edges more akin to what Gundam was doing at the time, but a similar outlook needed. Understand the character design, refine what makes it work, and splash it with paint to make it work. That's what's required, and the designers haven't done that. They've taken the traditional design philosophy, scaled back the detail, and then didn't bother adding any paint. The result is, this thing looks like an unfinished prototype, or from some angles, a bootleg even. Instead of no detail and a shit ton of paint, there's just enough detail to make you want more, and so much bare plastic that makes you wonder why this figure costs $10 more than Masterpiece Megatron. Yes, $10 more than Masterpiece Megatron. And that's pretty much the main issue that this figure presents, causing it to drift aimlessly within the fandom collective consciousness. From a 2015 perspective, it lacks the pizzazz that people had come to expect, and from a 2021 perspective, it doesn't have the bells and whistles that modern Masterpiece figures have. And look, I don't pretend to be the most knowledgeable expert on what Masterpiece is and isn't supposed to be. My Masterpiece collection is weird to say the least, and given the shift in aesthetic, there was definitely a point where I fell off the line entirely, at least until recently. But I can at least acknowledge what they were trying to do and see that they didn't quite succeed. Plus, beyond that, there are a couple of garden variety lackluster elements too. He's got landing gear, which is nice, but it has the Gavolt issue where lightly tapping the top causes the whole thing to topple over. The front guns open up to reveal missile launchers, which is pretty damn neat, but why are they so hard to untab? He also feels really light, like honestly lighter than even Commander class Jetfire. I get that this is supposed to be a Masterpiece figure, designed for display, not playing, but compared to other Masterpiece figures from around the same time, it doesn't feel like you're getting your money's worth. And sure, it makes an okay display piece with the combination of its size and included stats stand which works out of the shield, very nice touch, but without the paint or the extra mechanical detail, it loses any and all shelf presence. It feels like this mode is trying to walk the line between display piece and fun toy, and Masterpiece has done so successfully in the past, but in this instance they fell flat on their face thanks to the kerfuffle surrounding the new aesthetic that they weren't quite used to. In many ways, this was a prototype for a new era of Masterpiece, but that doesn't excuse the lackluster nature of the end product. It may be treading new ground, but it's still mediocre. I don't hate this mode, and for all my complaints, I don't consider it truly bad. I just get nothing from it. Plagiarizing myself with the way I've described other designs in the past, it's white noise, lukewarm porridge, providing nothing of worth. And that's going to be a running theme going forward. I wasn't lying when I said the core jet was legitimately the best part of the package. So let's trudge on to the next two modes and get this over with. Tally-ho, people. Tally-ho. Okay, for the transformation sequence, I'm going to do the core robot first, and then the combined mode later. So right off the bat, this part of the transformation is the only part of the transformation that I feel lives up to the Masterpiece name. Now, I know these days the term Masterpiece is going through a bit of a metamorphosis, given the increasing quality of mainline and all that jazz, but even at the time, Masterpiece transformations were known for their cleverness. And that is present for this mode, but not for the combined mode. But you know, keeping it positive for now, we're just focusing on the core jet now, and the transformation is pretty good. Now, first things first, you want to make sure that you remove the Brainmaster, otherwise the transformation won't work, and also retract all of the landing gear, as well as take this little doodad and take it off. Oh no, parts for wait, that joke's getting old, forget about it. Take the arms and untab them from the bottom legs, although that one has a bit of a hard time tabbing in on my copy. You actually have to separate them a little bit first, and then you do the old leg pull method. The pull-out method, oh so effective. Now I've said this before, and I'll say it again, I have never liked sliding rails on Transformers. It just causes so many problems with longevity. Like, these work fine for now because I haven't been transforming it that much, but if you're the kind of person to frequently transform your figures, well, you might want to be careful with these because they may become loose over time. Anyway, you take these bits and fold them in, bring out the feet like so. Now, this is something I always seem to forget. Come to the backpack and push the cockpit down so that it remains nice and below the head. Completely forgot about it until I was filming this. Take the wings and fold them towards the back. No locking tabs, but they work well enough. Bring the shoulders up on these double hinges. Bring the forearms out on their double hinges. Can be a little bit tight at times, but you should get it eventually. Bring out the fists like so. And now this shit is really cool. You want to open up this cavity in the chest there, take the Brainmaster and make sure he's fully extended and straightened, and he fits right into the cavity there, and as you close it up, whoa! That kind of gimmick is not something you often see on a Masterpiece figure, but I really like it. These kinds of transformations on Masterpiece figures I find really fun, and I wish they do that more these days, instead of focusing on ridiculous levels of Sunbow toon accuracy. But that's not all, oh ho ho, that's not all. You take the nose cone, you take this top section and rotate it up, come to the bottom and rotate that bottom section up as well, come to the top again and rotate the handle around 180 degrees, then angling the double hinges and all that jazz, collapse it like so. Next thing you want to do is open this section up, and it's on a double hinge, which will be very important. He's got a sword blade, and you'll notice there's two different parts on the sword blade. There's that open part and there's the closed part, because on the nose cone you've got a nice tab there and it plugs in like so. And then to complete the effect you close this section up. If you give it a nice push it should straighten itself out. Although full disclosure, this is not the original sword since I lost both of the original swords. This is the sword from the KFC upgrade. So unfortunately, although the blade stores in the robot mode, in the jet mode doesn't go all the way. But hey, that's beside the point. I'm just showing this because I want to make sure I cover it, because I seem to have forgotten it in the script, and it's just important to discuss. But yeah, ultimately the transformation is pretty fun, and the closest thing to a Masterpiece style transformation that this whole set gives you. I don't have problems with the transformation itself. I do have problems with this core robot, but that's not really to be discussed here. So in terms of tactile nature for this, good job, good job. In his core robot, the aesthetics are definitely the highlight of the show. Yes, that is not so secret foreshadowing for what the problems are, but as a display piece, this robot once again works quite well. Right off the bat, the proportions are awesome, nice and heroic, but not too exaggerated. They work really well in spite of the oversized backpack. Sometimes backpacks like this can make the chest seem wider than it actually is, so kudos to them making sure that didn't happen. Also dig the blue details on the back of the wings. It's one of the few places where you can tell the designers really cared. The head sculpt is also fantastic with a chiseled chin and piercing yellow crest. Interesting that they chose to go with yellow plastic to avoid potential paint issues. Yellow is about as hard to do as red after all. Unlike the lack of paint in the vehicle mode, this actually works quite well. And beyond that, the head still retains the perfect range of motion in spite of the gimmick. It's great that they managed to go the extra mile so why does the rest of the robot have articulation issues? Like, this just does not hold up to the Masterpiece standard in terms of posability. Hell, it doesn't hold up to chug sensibilities, whether from present day or back in 2015. The arms come with these lovely ratcheted shoulders, but there's no locking mechanism holding them in place. So move them wrong and whoopsies! Yes, this time it's an actual problem as opposed to me mistransforming something, which was the case with Dinobot. Sorry, I do get things wrong, but in this case, the designers actually got something wrong. Especially in the legs too. Like, for the most part, everything from the waist up works satisfactorily, but when you go below it, you start to get a little confused. There's no universal hips, no ankle tilts, and for some reason, the ratcheted knees are much sturdier in the forward direction than they are in the backward ones. Some people may think this is perfectly acceptable for a figure that is trying to tackle 4 different modes, but this came out the same year as Combiner Wars, and somehow every figure from that line has better articulation than this. And sure, waists and ankles aren't super necessary on a robot, but 1, it's a Masterpiece figure, and 2, universal or ball-jointed thighs sure as hell are. It's pulling a Universe Cyclonus, only with the legs instead of the arms. The design is cool as hell, but the articulation just ruins it, and also, why are the arms hollow? Again, Masterpiece, not Chug. Yeah, Masterpiece has had hollowness back in 2013, 2 years prior to this figure's release, and we all remember the fumble that was the Trax Road Rage Loud pedal mold, but that was for Carbots. This is basically a robot just elongating itself. Was there no way to engineer a flap? It's not like we're dealing with a tight budget here. This figure cost over 350 Aussie dollary dues. Also, you'd think the wrist guards would be attached to the wrists, but apparently nope. Granted, it's not as bad as Power of the Prime's Jazz, but still, come on, Masterpiece. Not Chug, mate. Even the accessory game is wonky. Sure, the sword does work pretty damn well, and looks resplendent, but, why is he holding it like that? Why can't he just hold it normally? Why is he stuck using it like a lollipop? Oh, well, at least the sheath still pegs into the shoulder, as was the case with the G1 toy, but oh my, look at that hollowness. Usually, I don't complain about hollowness on this channel. Honestly, it doesn't bother me that much, even in this example. But again, Masterpiece. This doesn't feel like a Masterpiece. This feels closer to a Unicron Trilogy toy. Maybe it's all due to the Brainmaster gimmick, but like, if they were willing to go the extra mile to make the head turn, surely they could have at least given us universal hips. Ah well, at least it still looks nice. The presence is still pretty neat thanks to the size and general aesthetic. It's not a full-on Masterpiece aesthetic that draws your eyes to the masterful design work because, well, it's not quite masterful design work, but it'll do. But again, this isn't the main event for most Star Saber fans. We've got one more mode to tackle, and unfortunately, once again, we've got to deal with a whole load of This transformation is not a Masterpiece transformation by any stretch of the imagination. Compared to practically every other Masterpiece transformer out there, it is ridiculously simple. I understand that the original toy wasn't the most complex thing on the planet, but there are so many bells and whistles they could have added to make it better. With all the messiness at the back of the combined jet mode, and all of the articulation issues with the core robot, they really could have added more steps here. This feels to me more like a Unicron Trilogy toy than it does a Masterpiece toy, maybe indicating they had the prototype lying around for ages, although that's really unlikely. It's just a hypothesis with no evidence. All I can see is that they're not putting their best foot forward here, and it's an incredibly boring, albeit ultimately fine transformation. I suppose we'll start off with the skeleton. You want to remove these legs from there. 2 tabs from either side that unlock from the arm here. Then you bring this section out here, and you'll notice that this whole thing comes into place and locks into place. So kind of like a Combiner Wars style leg transformation, but not really because it only goes halfway. I mean, I suppose I like the panels that flip out of there. It's kind of nice. But ultimately, they could have foregone that gimmick and just filled in the back section instead. Grab the head and push it over the front. Take this section, unhook it from the back here. There's no tabs at the back here. It just kind of sits there, which is a big oversight. But either way, that just slips on the back there and actually locks into place. Hooray, locking tabs. Now something is afoot. You want to bring this section up and bring this section up. And of course, if you haven't already by accident, you fold the wing back. You'll notice the thighs are the wrong way around, so you want to bring them around properly, having this kind of pointy area facing the back, because then that will allow you to rotate the knee properly. Can't really do it properly the way it is. So that rotates like so. And then you want to bring these out a little bit. Yoink the arms out on sliding rails. Oh joy, I love sliding rails, because they totally don't get stuck like they just did now. And depending on how you do it, you just need to make it so that these things rotate forward like so. They might be rotated in weird ways, depending on how you collapse them. And if you haven't already, the fists push in. Keep in mind, these are KFC fists, but they should be the same on the official version. And oh look, here's a little teapot, short and stout. Why the f did they do this? Next up, we have the core robot mode. You want to collapse the arms into their vehicle configuration by collapsing the hinges and the fists. Bring the legs together and bring these sections up. And then this section I don't particularly like. What you want to do is bring the hips up like so, bring the chest up like so. But oh, it's sitting out. Well, that's because you push it down a little bit but not all the way, only halfway, and it really sits awkwardly. There should have been tabs for the chest. It should have tabbed in. Hell, the arms don't even tab in. They just kind of sit on the side there. The whole thing is haphazard. Really, no locking tabs, using the sliding rails in the completely wrong way. I really dislike this. Anyway, I accidentally knocked it over earlier, but one thing you might not have noticed is that these bits actually fold inwards, changing the detail so the chest looks a bit cooler. Unironically, that's my favorite part of the transformation. It's masterpiece ingenuity. It's something you wouldn't expect. But hey, it's hiding in plain sight. But yeah, these bits kind of just sit towards the front and we're ready to clip this into place. There are these flaps on the core robot that open up, and you got that little slot there that the whole thing tabs into like so. It's pretty awkward, to be honest. They could have really thought this out better. And of course, this thing's basically just held up by the ratchet, so you gotta make sure that's in place. Finally, come around and close up these little gap fillers here. Well, I suppose the more accurate term would be panels. Don't know why I said gap fillers. And bring these little doodads around here. And then just like the anime, you bring up the helmet, clip it over the head, and the mask should come down, but if it doesn't all the way, you can just push it down the rest of the way. And bring the antennae up like so. Last but not least, adjusting them however you desire. So yeah, I guess the transformation's not terrible, but it's not that great either. Doesn't feel like a masterpiece style transformation, even less so than what I've seen in the movie masterpiece line. It just feels like a big, dumb, toyetic toy, and that can work if that's what you're doing. But the clashes of aesthetics and the clashes of materials just ultimately doesn't work. It doesn't have enough mechanical detail to make this simple transformation feel interesting, and there's not much tactile joy to be had. I don't know, there's just something missing. I know I'm probably not making sense here, but something is off about this transformation in its simplicity. It's not that it's simple, it's the way it's executed, and I just feel there's nuances we're missing. So, I don't like transforming this thing. I should, because it should be incredibly fun, but I just don't, so I'm sorry, it's just the way I feel about it. The robot mode ends up being the culmination of everything wrong with this design. Compromised articulation, lack of ambition to push it into the masterpiece category, and failure to understand what's required to make the aesthetic work. I don't think it's a bad robot mode by any means, but Jesus, this thing has compromises. I don't know if it was thanks to something being too difficult or just a lack of care from the designers, but something is missing, and that fact pisses me off more than the actual figure does. The head sculpt is fine, I guess. It pretty accurately depicts the animation model, although it doesn't go much beyond that. It doesn't seem to exude the same sense of personality other masterpiece figures do, but at least it gets the job done. Also, nice job allowing the back arm to unpeg, so you can go for a non-parts forming method or one that allows an extra amount of articulation. See? It's perfectly possible. Ain't that right, Clip? Oh, nothing. I swear, one of these days I'm really gonna give that figure what it truly deserves. The chest is also fine, I guess. It's weird, I should be all over this with the gorgeous chrome on show and the lovely thruster detail, but something doesn't seem to fit the design. If I had to take a guess, it's probably the wings. They're going for the toy style, whilst the rest is going for the anime. These things should have been thinner for this mode, but then maybe that would have made the jet mode look weird or not properly collapse into the combined form. Still, I would have taken compromises in the alt mode over this. It's weird how said jet mode ends up being the best part of the set, because honestly, this right here should be, but it just isn't. Take the limbs, for instance. They're basically taking the detailing issues from the combined jet mode wholesale. There's barely any paint on this goddamn thing. It's all plastic breakup. On a chug toy, I'd be praising it for such. But on a toy like this, it just doesn't work. And sure, maybe I could forgive this if it posed amazingly. Hell, even if it had decent articulation for a masterpiece, I could be a bit more lenient, but it just doesn't. I mean, it's got the bare basics, but even those are hindered in some regard. Yes, the butterfly joint is a lovely addition, as is the ab crunch, but the waist swivel is pathetic. I've seen more on goddamn Earthrise Optimus Prime and the Studio Series Bumblebee Seekers. And yes, I can see the part in there that's causing it to get locked up, but there was no reason to have a design like that. Again, this figure is 10 freedom bucks more than MP-36. Why was it outclassed like this? Also, come on, this is a piss poor excuse for an ankle tilt. It's outclassed by masterpiece figures from 4 years prior. How the do you do that? And that's if you're using the stock joints. See, I installed the Kentucky Fried Gundam upgrade kit on this thing because out of the box, oh my god, the joints are piss poor. KFC also ended up doing a Victory Leo because for some reason Takara just forgot, and those joints were basically mandatory for the damn thing to work. The worst part was easily the hips, practically disintegrating over time. Fortunately, I never had to deal with such, since I didn't bother opening mine until after the kit arrived. Good thing too, because I stupidly threw out the extra swords with the box, and the gun, and the extra hilts on garbage night. me. Speaking of, hello lollipop sword again. Come the f*** on, mate. There's practically no reason to have it like this. At least the shield works alright, even if it's stuck facing forward. And sure, the KFC upgrade does give you this weird loosey-goosey adapter that allows Star Saber to hold it properly. Actually, scratch that. Apparently I've lost the piece that connects these two as well, so the whole thing can just get f***ed. Gotta hope the guy who buys this doesn't notice it. And admittedly, it does look pretty nice. But this once again brings it back to that same upgrade kit argument. Hell, it applies to the joints as well. Upgrade kits should make good toys better, not fix problems left behind by designer negligence. Just overall, the whole release feels like it was rushed out the gates. I said earlier that either something was causing them to compromise or the designers didn't really give a shit. And honestly, I think it's the latter, given how the figure was released. See, Takara ran a fan poll to see what people wanted in the line. And by people, I mean Japanese people living in Japan with a Japanese home address, with a beautiful Japanese car and a beautiful Japanese wife. How did we get here? Because the managers of the Masterpiece line only really care about this area of the world. That's not a joke, by the way. See the upcoming Masterpiece Coronation set kerfuffle for more details. Thing is, polls can often cause conflicts between what a creative individual is used to doing or want to do and what they're actually obligated to do. Case in point, I was desperate to do a video on Energon Sharksicon, but patrons voted for Takara Legends Slipstream, so I had to deliver a video on that topic instead. The feeling I get from this is that the designers didn't really want to make a figure in this way. It wasn't the style they were used to, and getting it to work may have been a pain. I could be wrong, but it feels like a begrudging Masterpiece release, as opposed to one made from a place of passion. Still, that doesn't account for the oddities like the poor materials and extreme lack of die-cast. As was the case with the vehicle mode, it feels lighter than your average Commander figure. I don't even know how that's possible. And yes, it does have die-cast, but for a figure of this size, clearly not enough. That in itself would be fine if the figure didn't cost the same price as a night or two in a fancy hotel. But again, you know. Ultimately, this figure is extremely confusing. The aesthetic nonsense I understand, given it's the first attempt, but the price isn't indicative of what you're paying for, and the lack of paint is completely baffling. Plus, why is the core jet the best part of the package? That's the weirdest thing to get right. And here's the thing, I don't dislike this mold at all. It just has a lot of nitpicks that take a ridiculously long time to get through, and there's not really much to balance it out. The reason I don't list many positives in each mode is because there's nothing really to talk about, and that may give the impression that he's all bad. He's not bad at all, but he's definitely not good either. If you're a massive fan of the character, he'll probably do as a placeholder, especially given his resplendent size, which seems to be the only thing that justifies this figure's price tag. But if you're only interested in the design, or you're a bit picky about what your figures do, like I am, then there's not really much here to enjoy. Ultimately, the way I see it, he lacks the presence that a figure of this size should have. I've handled worse figures that have commanded more attention, and as such, I have no feelings towards him. No positive, no negative, none at all. And full disclosure, for as much as I criticize the price, that's not what I paid. I paid the price of a Commander class figure, so ultimately I can't get as mad as most. You'd be surprised by what you can find in Facebook group sales, to be honest.
Oh, some guy's selling some pretty nice posters. Some guy's selling my posters. Being sold by Vaughn Vanderbilt!
But even so, I'm sorry, I'm just getting nothing from this. Masterpiece, at least official Masterpiece, is supposed to be special. When a release comes out, it's a celebration. Sure, there have been some hiccups in recent years, but that's the same with every line. People congregate to official Masterpiece releases, they sell off their placeholders to make room. They invite their mates over, they search around for the best deals and the hidden bonuses. Star Saber just isn't deserving of that pedigree. Honestly, 150 Aussie dollary dues is the perfect price for him, but he's not that price usually. He's not a bad figure, but he's certainly teetering on the edge of one. And I think that's the main reason why people are still clamoring for an update. When people ask for a Commander class Star Saber, they're doing so because this figure doesn't quite scratch the itch that they're trying to scratch. Transformers Victory, at least from what I can gather, is drenched in late 80s anime style, and is apparently one of the most extra series the franchise has ever provided. When people request Studio Trigger to work on a Transformers show, Victory is what they hope it to be like. And sure, this is coming from someone who hasn't seen the show, but I can see the impact it had on the community, and I can see that this figure isn't really capturing that style at all. It's just a stock standard figure that exists because Takara saw there was a market for it. It doesn't understand what it's trying to do, and it constantly sabotages itself because someone somewhere in the designer pipeline couldn't be pushing it to the next level. If you desperately need this Star Saber in your collection, if it's a grail of sorts, then you'll be perfectly satisfied, but not wowed, not blown away. And for that reason, I'm selling it off soon. Hopefully it'll end up in the hands of someone who will enjoy it much more than I ever will. In the coming months after selling it, I'm going to use those funds to give Planet X Cadmos a shot. Sure, here's a different version of the character, a very different version, but at least that figure embodies the extra aesthetic, one that the character deserves. And before you pester me about the other versions, no, I am not partaking in the Iron Trans one. Deadass looks like they took the Victory model and added those rounded Minecraft filters to it. Blech. I'm sure it's well made, but personally I think it looks hideous. I do kinda want the Robot Masters version one day though. But in the meantime, I'm hoping someone will Vaughn! Where the f did he go?
Where did what go?
Don't bullshit me. Where the did you send Star Saber?
Well, don't look at me. I've got no clue what you're on about, you bastards.
Yeah, I'm starting to get why people go nuts over this guy. God, I really wish Twitch would let me say the S word. Oh, that must be the More Realms Thievery service. I guess they were able to get that Star Saber I asked for. Give me a minute just to check this out.
Where's his gun?
Back, come on, the devil to see rotten flesh hanging off the plastic toy.